People often say to me, what made you into a social activist, into a radical?
The pot doesn't get to tell the potter what the pot's worth.
The person who purchases something determines the worth.
He said, Mr. Campolo, you're undeserving, you're unworthy, but you are not worthless. Jesus died on the cross for you. That huge price was paid for your salvation. People often say to me, what made you into a social activist, into a radical? And in many, I'm not half as radical as my students at Eastern. We were talking, you know, your professor in Romans was, we were talking about the Anabaptist tradition.
Is that Anabaptist?
Anabaptist.
How you saying
that? Yeah, it's not Baptist. It's quite the opposite.
Anabaptist.
Yeah,
Anabaptist.
and it comes out of the Mennonite tradition, the Menno Simons and the Amish. And our students at Eastern are very much into that. They are very much into that. And they basically are into it because they are saying exactly this. They are saying there is sacredness in other people, and we want to read the 25th chapter of Matthew. That's why on the inside of these little bracelets, we all call ourselves red letter Christians now, is Matthew 25:40. As you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. And they're saying what you just said in exactly the same words. That trumps everything else that we know about Christianity. That the Jesus who died on the cross chooses to confront us through these people who come to us hurting. And the way we relate to them in their need is the way we relate to Jesus. It's very interesting. When I was a kid and I was getting into all this social activism, my pastor said, don't forget, you first got to come to the altar and get right with God before you can go out there and get right with others. You've heard that line. Yeah. And one day it hit me. That's just the opposite of what Jesus says. Jesus says if you come to the altar and you're not right with your brother, forget this altar stuff. We don't want you to coming down just as I am and get crying at the altar. Go out there and get reconciled to your brother and then come to the altar. Because if you can't find God in your brother or your sister in need, you're never going to find him at the altar.
Well, after I heard The Life of the Beloved, the series, and a lot of things started, like when I'd meet people, I'd think, here comes the image of God on legs.
Amen.
And it changed everything. I wasn't seeing a fan, I hate that word. But I never really hated me, I didn't like me very much. And people would be standing in line telling me how wonderful I was. Oh my gosh. Before I left the Gaithers the first time, that's when I landed the plane instead of crashed it. I would be sitting there thinking, you know, if you'd never been born, I wouldn't be bored right now.
Yeah, there you go.
That is horrific. Because they were telling me how wonderful I was, and I knew I wasn't. But when I finally realized the pot doesn't get to tell the potter what the pot's worth. Yeah. The potter has told the pot what the pot is worth, and the pot doesn't get a vote. It is my duty to agree with the potter. Who am I to tell God I wasn't worth it?
Yeah, to think about unworthiness. I mean, we've said that, it's almost like blessed. We've made it into a two-syllable word. We forget that means blessed. We somehow anglicize or King James-ize these words and forget what they meant. Unworthiness means unworthness, having no worth. And the last I checked, you know, within the bounds of economics, the person who purchases something determines the worth. You know, something is worth how much somebody will pay you for it. And
that's a Marxist concept. I just want you to know that.
I read your book, partly right.
Yeah, but
they're partly right.
Let me pick up on something. Okay. Peggy is here, my wife. One of her favorite professors in...
I do want to say I got past that, though. Now when I see the people, I say, they'll say, I know you've heard this before. And now I say, but I've never heard it from you. Yeah. And it makes a difference that I look at them as here comes the image of God on legs, and I wanted to.
But that before you do that, that's your book, Connecting with Jesus. When you were talking about how, man, if you value someone, if you value someone, it will affect the way you connect with them. If you truly believe that every human is made, whether it's the homeless person or whoever, in the image of God, and we wouldn't dare trample on the little wafers and little cups of wine that we take on Sundays. The ultimate sacraments are these human beings. The ones that
Francis, every human being is. Peggy had a favorite teacher in college, J. Wesley Ingalls, And he distinguished between unworthy and worthless. We are never to say that we are worthless. We do have to say, I don't deserve this from you, God. Thank you for giving it to me. Thanks for establishing. Yeah. And it all revolves around a story that I've often used when telling this. I came into class one day late, huffing and puffing. Sat down, and I was sitting on the front row because it was the only seat left. I'm just catching my breath, and Engels did an unforgivable thing. I'm just catching my breath, having run across. Mr. Campolo, would you lead the class in prayer? So I started praying. Dear God, I thank you that you love us in spite of the fact that we are so worthless. He said, just a minute, stop. I looked up, everybody looked up. He said, Mr. Campolo, you're undeserving, you're unworthy, but you are not worthless. Jesus died on the cross for you. Your point, that huge price was paid for your salvation. You're infinitely worth.
Yes. You're
unworthy, but not worthless. Would you continue the prayer? kind of took the edge off of it for me. The whole sense of seeing how valuable you are, how precious you are. Sometimes when I'm talking to college students, I'll say, do you realize you were once a sperm? You realize that? You were once a sperm? Did you ever think of that? Not only that, but you were once one of 5 million sperm in a group. And at the end of a long, long tunnel, there was one egg.
And the race was on.
And there was a race.
And you passed all those two-headed sperms.
He won. The odds were 5 million to 1, and you won.
Can you believe it?
You make the Olympics look like nothing. If your mother had a headache, you would not be here today. You never thought about this, did you? You are of infinite value, of infinite worth.
Good swimmer.
Yeah, there you go. So don't ever say I'm a loser. The odds were 5 million to 1, and you came through. You are a winner.
Amazing?
Go and look at yourself in the mirror and say 5 million to 1, and I came through.
Yeah.
And a more serious note, dealing with that whole question of our value and our worth, I don't think I've heard it said quite as well as you have said it in that little spiel that you did just a few minutes ago. So I do have to, affirm that. Connecting like Jesus is connecting with the sacredness in that other person. Yeah. Martin Buber, the Jewish philosopher, called it the I-thou encounter, that in the other I sense something more than the other. I sense a sacred presence there. And I love to tell the story of walking, when I was teaching at the University of Pennsylvania, walking down walking towards 34th and Spruce Street, just after an evening lecture, standing on the corner, and the duck lady, this schizophrenic woman, who constantly quacked. That's why we called her she never stopped quacking, not for a moment. Quack, quack, quack. Wandered the campus, seemed to be omnipresent. Anybody that was ever at Penn over that 20-year period knows the duck lady. And she came up right alongside of me. Quack, 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 quack. And I turned, and she turned towards me. And in a mystical encounter, there was a spiritual energy within me that when I looked into her eyes, I reached right down into the depths of her being. And I felt her look into my eyes and reach down into the depths of my being. We connected like Jesus. Note, we connected. I didn't connect with her alone. She connected with me. We connected with each other. And it was stunning. And she stopped her quacking. The only time anybody I talked to ever heard her stop. And she looked around as though coming out of a trance, which I'm sure she was. And she said, it's lovely. It's really quite lovely, looking around. And before I could respond, the light changed, and the whole gang of people around me started moving forward, and somebody brushed against her, and her head shook, and she fell back into her schizophrenic state and started quacking again, and she disappeared in the crowd. But here I am at a Pentecostal school, and I will talk about healing. I had the sense that if I could have held on to her spiritually for just a little longer, maybe 2 or 3 minutes longer, then the healing would not have been temporary. Because you say, you're a social scientist, don't you believe in psychiatry and psychotherapy? Of course I do. But after they've done all that they can, I have good news. There is still a balm in Gilead that can connect with people. And so that's what the book, Connecting Like Jesus, is about, how to connect on that kind of a level.